Hi, my name is Kim Cullen, and I'm a personal injury attorney in Winter Park, Florida. Today I'm going to talk about what a personal injury trial looks like. So a lot of people, their only exposure to trials is what they've seen on television and in the movies. And while there are some similarities between what people see on television and the movies to a real trial, usually trials, and personal injury trials in particular, aren't nearly as sexy or exciting as what people see on television or in the movies. So for one thing, most trials in movies or television, they're concluded within an hour's time. Well, the typical personal injury case, your run-of-the-mill rear-end car accident type case, that case will usually take almost a week or around a week to try. So a lot of people don't realize this. Even with fairly straightforward accident facts and medical testimony, it still takes around a week to try an average personal injury case. If the case is particularly complex, if there are novel issues, or if the damages are very complicated and severe, then sometimes personal injury cases can take weeks or months to complete. So every personal injury case begins with jury selection. And in the jury selection process, the lawyers for the plaintiffs and then the defendants, no matter how many there are, they all get a chance to talk to all the prospective jurors and to ask questions and to try to determine whether the potential jurors may have some bias that will keep them from being fair to either or both sides, or if they have some other reason why they can't be in the trial, where they're not qualified or sufficient to be in the trial. And then the lawyers have a chance to try to strike the jurors that they think are biased or unfit. And then they can also strike jurors for any reason that they choose, subject to some legal rules that probably aren't important for us to talk about in this video. So after a jury is selected and seated, then each side gets a chance to give an opening statement. And that's probably more what you're used to seeing on television, is lawyers just talking about the case in a formal or informal way and just kind of telling the jury what the case is about. In an opening statement, you're previewing the case, and in a closing statement, which I'll talk about in a minute, it's also called summation, you're summing up what the evidence said. So after opening statements, then that's when the evidence in the case gets admitted to the jury. And so evidence in the case comes in a few different forms. Most of it is testimony from witnesses. So that may be lay witnesses or eyewitnesses to an accident. It is usually going to be the plaintiff. It usually is going to be a defendant or defendants if there are multiple defendants. It could be, and it almost always will be, medical doctors giving testimony about the plaintiff's injuries. It could be hired experts such as engineers or accident reconstructionists or economists or life care planners. So all of those witnesses would come to trial either live or by video, and the jury would listen carefully to what they're saying and take that as the evidence in the case. In addition to testimony, then there will almost always be documents. In a typical personal injury case, it might be medical records or reports or things of that nature. In different kinds of cases, they'll have different kinds of documents. If it's a breach of contract case, there might be a whole bunch of contract documents between two parties. And all of this information goes to the jurors in the form of either listening or looking at the documents. And when the jury's ready to deliberate, the documents actually go back with the jury so they can have time to look at them. So once all of the evidence is admitted, and the plaintiff always goes first, puts in his or her evidence first, and then the defendant gets to go and puts in their evidence, and both sides get a chance to cross-examine the other side's evidence or witnesses. Once that's concluded, then the parties do their closing statements. And as I said earlier, the closing statement, it would be essentially a summation of the evidence, and that's when the lawyers try to convince the jurors that their side is right and the other side is wrong. Once the attorneys are finished with closing statements, then the judge will typically read the jurors what are called jury instructions. And the jury instructions tell the jurors what the law is, and they instruct the jurors about how to apply the facts to the law. And then the jurors are excused to go back and deliberate, and they go back into their jury room, and then they work out what will ultimately become the verdict. And so the jurors will have their memories of what the evidence was in terms of the testimony, and they'll have the documents in front of them. And they go through that with each other and around a table usually, and they, if we're lucky, if the lawyers are lucky, the jurors will come up with a verdict or render a verdict. So they knock on the door, the jury foreman leads them back into the courtroom. They'll hand the jury verdict form to the judge. The judge will read the verdict form into evidence, and then the trial of the case will be over, and the jury will typically thank the judge will typically thank the jurors for their service and send them on their way. So what most people don't understand is that doesn't necessarily mean that the trial is over. That part of the trial is over, but usually after the jury leaves the room, the lawyers have various motions that they make. After the lawyers leave for the day, there are typically post-trial motions that are asserted or made, and then sometimes, many times, an appeal by one side or the other is lodged. And so a lot of people have the misconception that a trial is the end of everything in a case, but it's really just a stopping point along the way. So I've given you just a very abridged version of what a jury trial is. If you have any questions about what a personal injury jury trial looks like, reach out to us. We love to answer questions. All you have to do is call our office at 407-254-4901. You can text us at 407-644-4444. You can even email me to my personal email address, kmc@cullen-hemphill.com. If you like the information that we shared in this video, I would encourage you to visit our website or our YouTube channel, where we have literally hundreds of other videos that are on legal topics very similar to this one. And if you really like the information that we provided and you like the way that we do it, I would encourage you to hit the red subscribe button below, and our new videos will be fed into your video feed on YouTube.